Welcome into episode 265 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridgette and Scott McLaughlin. The Bruins defeated the New Jersey Devils 3-0 at the TD Garden a few nights ago. But this is going to be, in part, a mailbag episode. But before we get into all that, let's get to Bridgette and Scott's opening shifts.
Yeah, I'll start just running through some injury updates from Wednesday's practice. Linus Ullmark, Brandon Carlo, Matt Poitras, and Derek Forbort were all on the ice practicing in full, wearing regular jerseys. Trent Frederic was not on the ice for practice. Afterwards, Jim Montgomery said, Ullmark's back. They're not sure if he's going to start Thursday against Colorado or back up, but he's available. He'll be on the active roster. They already sent Brandon Bussi back down to Providence. Poitras and Carlo, Montgomery said they'll have to see how they feel on Thursday. Sounds like they're close, but maybe they still need another game. Forbort will not be back Thursday. He's not yet an option. He's still kind of ramping up from this injury that was, really lasted longer term than I think anyone initially anticipated, including Forbort himself. We did get to talk to him after practice a little, and he basically just said like he's just tried to stay positive, kept trying to work through it. It feels like he's getting close. Felt pretty good out there. So, and then on Frederic, Montgomery didn't say exactly what it was, but he said it was precautionary, and they think he'll be fine. So, doesn't sound like there's anything to worry too much about there. But yeah, the overarching story is that the Bruins are getting healthier. So Brandon Carlo is on regular injured reserve. They can activate him, no problem. They don't have to make any other moves. When the time comes to activate Forbort, they will have to send at least one guy down and possibly two to make the cap gymnastics work. So there will be a decision coming up whenever that time comes.
Yeah, with Forbort, he said he had multiple setbacks, which and that he's had to build back like brick by brick essentially to getting back healthy, and it's been frustrating. And he doesn't usually give us much, but he did give us that detail that it's been basically the current approach is to just go back really slowly because otherwise setbacks could happen again. So taking it really carefully, being very cautious with Forbort. The thing about Poitras, he wasn't on any of the four regular lines in practice today, so I wonder if that kind of tells us that he's probably out another game. And like you mentioned, Bussi gets sent down. Right now, Boqvist's still up in the lineup. So if we're talking about down the road coinciding getting someone sent down to Providence to go with Forbort coming back to the active roster, I don't know if it's going to be Boqvist. We'll get more into that, I guess, when...
Yeah. And one thing I'll just note on Boqvist, he is also 2 games away from needing to go through waivers again. So that could also factor into this.
Yeah, but then that means they can't call him up the rest of the year if they're trying to avoid that. Right?
No. Well, yeah, it depends if he clears or not, obviously. But yeah, either you send him down because you're worried about losing him on waivers, so they send him down before he gets there, and then you're right, then you'd run into the same issue if you call him up. Yeah. Or if you put him on waivers and he clears, then that resets the clock on all of it, and you can call him up no problem again.
Which would still make it like basically wouldn't matter when you sent him back down then, because you'd pretty much be you either have to have decided you don't want him back up at all, or you're going to have to whisk waivers at some point, or keep him on the roster. So,
and on the one other thing I would note on waivers is Parker Wotherspoon would need waivers again already, and I don't think he's going anywhere because I think if he got put on waivers, I think he would probably get claimed.
Yeah, no, and Steen too would have to get go through waivers again now, right?
Yeah.
So pretty much anyone you send down, you're going to have to go through the waiver system,
except for Mason Lohrei or Johnny Beecher.
Because of their rookie contracts. So, I guess that kind of makes them easier options, which is weird because Beecher's been on the team the whole season. It would be a bit odd for to think about him going down, but at the same time, he's been healthy scratched a few times recently. And I don't see it as like a 0% chance that could happen. Like that could genuinely happen if Boquist keeps playing well. They don't want to risk it, or they don't want to risk sending someone else down. Sometimes that's the easiest option. But yeah, I think that was all I was going to say about the injuries. And my opening shift has to do with the comments Jeremy Swayman made after the Devils game. So we got an extended chance to talk to him. He was talking to the media for quite a bit. Scott, I know you asked him to not clarify, but just like followed up on the question about that he answered about the All-Star, being an All-Star, and how it vindicated him in arbitration and that kind of thing. He had a much more polished answer when asked the second time, just like, it happened and I learned from it. It was pretty much the main message that he had. But Scott, you had to try, and someone else as well followed up on your question, and he gave pretty much the same answer. But I think the comments that most people were paying closer attention to after the Devils game was when he said, because he's played 5 games in a row now as the starter, and it was when he said, I want them to know that, and I want everyone to know that I want the net every night. And some people are taking that as, is the happy couple not so happy right now? Like, is there some sort of fracture in the friendship? Is it Swayman saying, for my next contract, I want to be guaranteed that I'm like the number 1 starter? So I don't know what you guys thought of that. We can get to that now or later, because we do want to save some time for our questions that we got in the mailbag.
Well, I mean, I definitely think that their friendship and their relationship is definitely unique. And it's unique because it's not very often, especially at the professional level, where somebody you're in direct competition with for playing time, in particular the goaltending position, you're just so hunky dory and like, let me tell you about my best friend. It's like, well, you could be on the bench if your best friend outplays you. And that's why their dynamic is so unique. I guess the question is, does it ever get to a point where, yeah, maybe it does get, I think look, Swayman, it goes over Olmark's house for his kids to go on his lap when he dresses up as Santa Claus. So, I mean, clearly they're really good friends, but I do think they'd both tell you like they want the net. I don't know if that's going to lead to friction off the ice. I think it's just the reality of the situation that they're in.
Yeah, I don't think their friendship has changed at all. I don't think
because he also
stretch has changed it at all. I think this is why it's so unique and why it works, though, is that they are great friends, but they also keep pushing each other. Like, they push each other harder than anyone else pushes them, and I think that's clearly elevated both of them over now multiple seasons. That said, yeah, like, I think Swayman, to me, what I interpreted Swayman saying wasn't like, I want to start every game and I don't want Linus here anymore. Like, I don't think that's what he was saying. I think it was, I want to show people that I can handle this if I'm called upon to handle it. And whether that's, hey, you can count on me if Linus is out or he struggles or whatever, or you can count on me to start a playoff series and run with a series. Like, I also think that's part of it, because as we've talked about before, he hasn't had that chance yet. He has not started game 1 of a playoff series yet. So, I do think that's important to him. And I think that kind of does tie back to the arbitration hearing, where I'm sure part of the argument that was used against him was, hey, you've only ever split time. You've never been the true number 1. You haven't won a playoff series. Like, even though that's not really his fault because he just hasn't had the chance, I think it is important to him to be able to show and convince people that I can do this. Like, even though I haven't really had the chance, I can handle it.
And to the point of the friendship, he also at some point during the not press conference, but media availability said, I'm sure Linus will be back in no time. He's a Swedish Viking. He's like basically also hyping him up at the same time. He's like, I'm coming for you. But that's just kind of what their what they do to each other. And it is harder for other people to wrap their head around, because I don't know about you, but if anyone was coming for my job, I probably wouldn't be their friend. So it's just the nature of how people naturally respond to things like competition very differently, I guess. Then this in particular is different than probably how Scott would react if he found out I was trying to take his job.
You can have it if you want. I know how much you hate waking up at 6 a.m. every day, so good luck.
Yeah, no thanks. You know what time I wake up.
I definitely have a question I want to circle back on regarding this topic, but there is a mailbag question regarding the goaltending, so I'll just save it for then. Okay, so my opening shift before Scott, before Bridgette, and before the listeners roll their eyes, I just want to preface this with me saying I think there is 0.0001% chance that this happens. However, it's a Boston Bruins topic that was brought up. We are a Boston Bruins podcast, and look, this is supposed to be friendly banter. It's not all just who's scoring, who's not. Let's have some fun chit chat, okay? So on Spit and Chicklets, Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette, who are very tied in with the NHL, as we know. I mean, literally, they have connections up and down the sport, whether it's in media, players, coach, like management. Like everybody is friends with these two, and they have a ton of connections. And they have been credible sources in the past on certain stories. So I actually saw this on Twitter. I didn't even see this on the actual episode of the podcast. So I don't know what episode of the podcast it was, but basically Ryan Whitney was talking about how he's hearing rumors that Patrice Bergeron could be making a comeback because it is rumored that he is skating in some local rinks around the Boston area. No footage of these skates, so nobody can really tell if he's like working hard to get the rust off his game, or if he's just staying in shape for his alumni duties with the Bruins. I'm just going to leave it there and let you guys maybe run with it. I mean, I'm only bringing it up because we have to bring it up. They're talking about it and they're credible. And it's like, I don't think it's happening, obviously, for a million reasons, but I'm just going to bring it up and let you guys run with it.
Right. I mean, it's the most popular hockey podcast in the world talking about it, and it's guys with Boston connections. So, Ryan Whitney especially. So, yeah, it is worth discussing. I'm with you that I don't think it's happening. I would be very surprised. That said, I don't 100% dismiss it, and Brian, I'll go slightly higher than your percent and give it a full 1% chance. But yeah, to me, Patrice Bergeron seems like a player who, when he decides he's done, he's done. That said, like, we kind of live in an age now where it's like, has anyone ever really truly done? Like, Tom Brady retires for a month and comes back. Gronk takes a year off, comes back. David Krejci goes abroad for a year and comes back. Like, it's not totally unheard of. And if you're Patrice Bergeron, and last year was this last dance type season where all year long you think you have, your last great chance to win another cup, and then it all falls apart. You get injured late in the season. Your team gets knocked out in the first round. Like, just like worst case scenario of how such a great year could have ended. That obviously leaves a bad taste. If he's sitting there watching this year's team thinking, hey, you know what? This team's still pretty darn good. And maybe I feel really good. And maybe I see where I can plug in and help this team. Like, that's not totally insane to me. I think it's highly, highly unlikely. But I could see where the appeal from Bergeron's side would be. And if he's interested, then obviously the appeal to the Bruins is very obvious.
Yeah, like in my mind, if I'm hearing Patrice Bergeron is skating and like he's in, all right, I play tennis to keep in shape. Am I gonna go play Wimbledon this year? No, I'm not. Like, you can skate because that's how you like to keep in shape. and you enjoy skating and you enjoy hockey, it doesn't mean you have to go out and join an NHL team. So if it's true that he's out there doing that, in my opinion, it's just a good way to keep fit. and also, like, you can't completely, like, you didn't think Patrice was going to completely get rid of hockey from his life without even putting skates on ever again. So to me, that's more what I would take out of seeing him skating. But like Scott said, maybe there's this chance if Zacha goes down, or God forbid.
I don't even think it would like require someone going down. I think it's, we know the Bruins need help up front, and if Bergeron sees like a real chance to win a cup, I could see the appeal. I just don't think it's like.
Well, how many times this season have we said they're a top 6 forward short?
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
So there's one right there, but I just don't see it.
I will say though, Bridgette, I mean, if you were playing tennis and you had less than 12 months ago won a professional award as the best two-way tennis player at your position, and you are a tennis Hall of Famer, and you're less than a calendar year removed, there's a little smoke where there's fire. Now,
you're trying to tell me I should go play Wimbledon this year?
I'm just saying, follow your dreams, okay? I'm just telling you to follow your dreams. That's all I'm saying.
Are you better on grass, clay, hardcore?
I'm gonna go with grass.
Wii Sports. So what Scott said is true. Like, it would be no different than like, okay, just because he retired and we all know that, let's just pretend he didn't retire and maybe he was just on the shelf with an off-season surgery or something and was coming back mid-season, or like a little bit of gamesmanship, like you've seen with Tom Brady and Gronkowski and Krejci, as Scott mentioned. And I'm sure there's other examples of like a player just kind of like coming back on a little hint, wink, wink.
Mario Lemieux, Michael Jordan, like
yeah, exactly.
Roger Clemens did it like 3 times.
The list goes on. Absolutely.
I think Roger Clemens has some help, but that's okay.
Yeah. But I think some of the reasons why he wouldn't come back would be potentially the same reasons why he retired in the first place, which is maybe his body just feels like it's not where it needs to be, and he doesn't want his body to be tested that way anymore. Maybe he wants to keep spending time with his family and whatnot. And also, I could see him not wanting to step on the toes of Marchand's captainship, or captaincy, whatever word it is. There's a mailbag question about an NHL captain in their role for molding a team. I could see Bergeron, out of respect for Marchand, not wanting to overshadow him, and coming back in as like that captain figure. And
do you think Marchand would care?
It's not even so much about that. It's, would Bergeron even want that to be a story? Like, would he even want that possibility to be out there? Like, and I'm sure. I don't know. I'm sure Marchand wouldn't be totally upset with it, but I'm sure a little part of it might be like, I don't know.
I don't think he would be, only because they are so close that, if it were 2 guys who were maybe like a little more distant or like not quite best friends, maybe that friction surfaces a little. But I mean, in their case, they are like legitimately best friends. They still talk all the time, away from the rink. Their families are close, all that. So like, I don't think it would be that much of an issue. And it's worth noting here that Marchand himself has joked, I'm saying joked, but maybe not, multiple times this season about trying to convince Bergeron to come back. So, it's like, you can't really joke about something and then like be upset if it actually happens.
Yeah, I don't. Again, upset's not even so much the word. It just could be, there could just be a different dynamic in the locker room this year with Marchand's voice as the voice. It just, I don't think it would be an issue, but there could be something to there. Bergeron just might not want to step on his toes. And then similar. I don't know if Bergeron will want to. He's looking at what Charlie Coyle's doing and stepping up, and he's seeing what like other players. He might not want to come in just from a development standpoint and knock these guys back down after what they've done. But
they've already put Zacha to wing on a few occasions, and he's kind of been playing there for a while. So like Zacha, he's not really stepping on Zacha's toes to send him over to the wing on another line. So I don't think it disrupts Coyle really at all, but it would probably mean Zacha wasn't coming back to center. Or maybe it pushes your center depth back to something really good, but I kind of feel like it'd be more of a Zacha to wing situation.
I'm more so thinking like I'm with you guys. Like I mean, it's Patrice Bergeron. Like if he's playing and he comes back and he's feeling good, obviously. I'm more so I'm pretending like in my mind, if I'm Bergeron, like, and I'm at my dinner table contemplating coming back, these are probably things that I'm thinking of just from a human perspective. But it's definitely I said 0.00001%, but I've actually the crazier things have happened. I probably could convince myself to call it like a 5% chance. Honestly, it's not that crazy. It really isn't. It's just kind of like the optics, right? Like you've gone through this retirement perception during the 100th season. You've kind of embraced that alumni role. You're in the alumni team. It's like it's hard to picture him playing at Warrior with Adam McQuaid and Kevin Miller against Brighton Fire Department, and then joining up on the Bruins again and playing for a Stanley Cup in the same year. It's hard to visualize.
It would mean a complete 180 in terms of how he's been talking about his retirement and the reasons he gave in why he wanted to step away. Like he said that he's been happier than ever away. Like it's weird when he watches the team, but also he's just he seems at peace with it, and he said he's at peace with it. So that would mean he at some point just woke up feeling completely different, which I guess people do.
Yeah, well, you do also hear from players who retire and that itch lingers. You go through that period where your body says, okay, you're done. Then you have 6 months off or whatever, and suddenly your body feels pretty good. And maybe when he gets out there on the ice, some of those days, whether he's doing hard drills or just kind of cruising around, you think, hey, I feel pretty good. Hey, that back issue I had last year, not really feeling that. My back's been feeling good. And all of a sudden it's like, could I play? Do I actually feel good enough to play? Like plenty of players have gone through that. And with some guys, you retire and that's never an option. Your body just never feels good enough again. But there are plenty of guys where who go through that kind of a period of indecision where you start to second guess your calls. So, it's not. I don't know. Again, I don't think it's going to happen, but it was certainly a fun thing to discuss. It just kind of popped up out of nowhere from the Spit and Chicklets crew.
Yeah, well, we said at the end of last season, if he doesn't want to retire, he still has gas in the tank. So that's not really the question. I don't think that's really the question. If his back injury is healed and he's kept himself up in shape, he's still an NHL caliber player. So, and the Bruins would be more than happy to bring him in and have a conversation with him about that and solve one of their biggest problems, which would be adding a top 6 forward.
Well, if this did happen, financially, how would they have to make this work?
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly have to be for a minimal amount of money, and the Bruins would probably have to move some salary out somewhere, would be my guess. What exactly that looks like, I don't know. And it all depends on if it's a prorated $1 million contract, then you don't have to move around too much money to find a way to make that fit. It could even just be waiving a couple guys, but I haven't gone too deep into exactly how that would work, but obviously Bergeron would be aware of their cap situation and would know this is very little money, even close to a league minimum type thing. Because he's over 35, you could build in bonuses again. And with the cap going up and all the cap space the Bruins have next summer, which, we're going to get into some of that in the mailbag too, that like bonus overage, if he gets those bonuses, wouldn't hurt as much, which, again, it's worth reminding people who, in case anyone's forgotten, like the Bruins are playing $4.5 million short this season because that's how much they had carryover in bonuses from Bergeron and Krejci last year.
Bridgette, how much battery do you have on your laptop right now?
Half.
Okay. That's a telltale sign to get into this mailbag. So why don't we start with Tampa Tim, and Tim mentions how he's been listening to us since episode 42. We obviously very much appreciate that. He says to us, what is the impact? So again, stemming from the conversation we were just having, what is the impact of a captain on an NHL team, and specifically, how is Marchand's captaincy shaping the current makeup and play of this year's team? He goes on to talk about, well, I'll just read it. Also, I've been impressed mostly with Marchand controlling himself almost every game after getting mugged by players taking liberties with him. I figured the refs would be a little more aware of penalties against the captain, but maybe the refs have their own beef with 63. I'm sure there's a bit of homerism in the second part, but am I wrong? We've actually talked about that in the past. The refs really, sometimes in these behind the B episodes, you'll hear a mic'd up ref say, "Hey, congrats on being the captain," but then like clearly it doesn't really make much of a difference. But the original question, the impact of a captain on an NHL team, and how Marchand is shaping up the current room this year.
Yeah, I would say the biggest impact of a captain is sort of setting the culture in the locker room and bringing everyone together. Team bonding type things like that. That's the most important part is getting everyone on the same page, working in the same direction, not having guys feel like they're being left behind or not heard or like they're not really part of the group or anything like that. And that Marchand has certainly had great mentors in that respect in Bergeron and Chara, and that's part of this reputation that, the Bruins culture that you always hear so much about. That's really where it starts, is that everyone feels welcomed from day one. There's no rookie hazing. They don't even do rookie laps. If you're on the team, even if you're just in training camp, you're part of the team and you're treated that way from the get-go. Free agents who come in, captain's usually going to be the first one to talk to them. In fact, that was one of the first sort of tip-offs that perhaps Bergeron wasn't returning over the summer, was when some of the free agents like Shattenkirk and Lucic said that the first guy they talked to was Marchand. I was like, oh, okay. Because that was always Bergeron who was the first guy the free agents talked to. So those are some of the elements. And then on the day-to-day stuff, it's just like it's checking in with guys. It's being the communicator between the coach and the players and, letting Montgomery and the coaching staff know, hey, I think we need this today. I think we need to focus on this, or this player's dealing with this. And then communicating back of, hey, guys, we're doing this, and here's why the coaches are having us do this. So those, I would say, are main jobs of the captain.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, Scott. Bridgette, anything to add to that question?
He answered the role part in terms of the leading on the ice. I think Marchand, he hit a little bit of a slump, but he's rebounded and he's brought the intensity, and he's not getting the call still. We know that. I wouldn't have expected him to. He's been around the league too long and had so many things go on with him and the refs that it's not surprising to me that putting a C on his jersey didn't really help him out that much.
Yeah. I mean, and also, so how Marchand's captaincy is shaping up the current makeup and play of this year's team. I mean, again, Scott kind of alluded to it, but just like Marchand learned from leaders in the past, Chara, Bergeron, and countless others that never wore the C, like Mark Recchi and others. So I would just say this Bruins team, similar to other Bruins teams in the past, most Bruins teams in the past under this regime, like you're not gonna, maybe once in a while, but you're not gonna really you're seldom going to outwork them. They're certainly not going to give up on a game. Like, yeah, a game might look like it's getting away from them and on the scoreboard as well, but it's not because like they're just packing their bags for the night. Like, there's a lot of pride in the Bruins room, always has been, and Marchand certainly makes sure that is still the case. And beyond Marchand, McAvoy and Pastrnak will do the same as well. So it's just the continuation of their culture that Marchand is allowing to continue, and he enforces it for sure. Okay, so Scott says, not Scott McLaughlin, although it could have been Scott McLaughlin. I don't know the last name. It just says
He's
Scott.
been emailing himself this whole year.
I got a lot of questions.
Okay, Scott emailed us and said, it's obvious the team will look to make some adjustments via the trade market this year and will probably look for someone to fill the leadership / grit role that Milan Lucic was scripted for. Is there any way Lucic could find his way back into the lineup this season, and what date would he need to be re-rostered? If not Lucic, are there any younger under 30 guys around the league that might be a good fit for the Bees this spring and beyond?
Well, so on the Lucic front, worth noting that this is actually a notable week because his pretrial hearing is scheduled for this Friday, January 19th. So there could potentially be some news, at least on the front of like what's next in this legal process after that. I don't see Lucic returning, even if the legal situation is taken care of and settled. My guess, just my gut feeling, that no sources or reporting on this, is that he's been in the player assistance program since all this started, and I would bet he probably just stays there through the end of the season. I don't know that the Bruins really want to go through the whole process of trying to bring him back or dealing with that. And I think Lucic, because of the respect that he has for the Bruins, I don't think he'd try to really force the issue of like, hey guys, my legal situation's done, I'm ready to play again, and put the Bruins on the spot like that. Like, I think he'll work with them to kind of do whatever's needed. And if the organizational decision is like, we just don't want to deal with this year, I think Lucic would understand and just stay away.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I don't the like re-rostering, like he's never been off the roster. Like he's still, his stuff is still, like his nameplate and everything's still in the locker room. He's still on the team. They haven't kicked him off or anything like that. So like technically, yes, he could come back, but it just doesn't seem like that would be good for anything, like optically, that, and like rewarding a guy who clearly has done something very wrong. I think they learned from last season too about adding a controversial person into your lineup. When they had the Mitchell Miller fallout, and that they reversed that very quickly. This seems like another situation where if they were like, yeah, let's bring Lucic back, it would be met with immediate backlash and probably need to be reversed. And I think they know that. So I don't see him coming back. So should we hit the second part of the question, which was, I believe, asking what someone that you could add that would bring the kind of grit that Lucic brings, but under the age of 30, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the NHL standings, it'd probably be somebody on a losing team right now. It's difficult because the league has changed so much. You just don't really the players of Lucic's caliber. They're few and far between. So I mean, I don't know, like a guy that's kind of bounced around from team to team. Right now, he's in Ottawa, in your division. Again, he's not a great hockey player by any means, but if you put him in a fourth line role, he's not making a lot of money. Mixes things up, and what doesn't get pushed around would be a guy like Zach McEwen. He's 27 years old. I don't know how I haven't watched him much as a player, honestly, besides against the Bruins and knowing what kind of player he is. Scott, he might be a analytics nightmare. He probably is. I don't know. But if we're talking about somebody who kind of brings like what Lucic brings, which at this point in Lucic's career wouldn't be offense. He wouldn't be the power forward he was in the day. He would just be a fourth line tough guy. So if you're looking for a fourth line tough guy, I mean, somebody like a Zach McEwen would maybe be, I don't know. I'd have to look at more rosters around the league that are kind of dwindling in their standings.
Yeah, well, this is where it gets tough because it's like, Milan Lucic was not here to just be an enforcer or, a part-time player. Like, they had a relatively consistent role for him in mind. So if you're looking to add that, like someone who's going to be an everyday player who, yes, brings some physicality, yes, can drop the gloves, but can also play some hockey and like not, drag a line down, that's harder to find because, to Brian's point, there aren't a lot of those guys in the league in general anymore, and B, there aren't a lot who are going to be good enough to play on what you hope is a cup contender, which, like, Zach McEwen, it's a good name to pull, but he's not playing. He's not good enough to play on a cup contender. He would not be one of the Bruins 12, or in my opinion, even like one of their 15 best forwards right now. So if you're bringing him in, to me, that's more of like a Jared Tenorti type thing where it's like, hey, there might be a few games here in the second half of the season where we feel the need to beef up and throw someone in there who, we want to send a message and drop the gloves at someone. Like, you can get that guy real cheap. Like, that's not an issue.
Oh, you could probably get Jared Tenorti. He just fought again for Chicago the other day, actually. he's still in the league. He's played on everything so far.
Yeah, so like you can find that kind of guy, and McEwen would fit that. But if you're looking for someone who's actually going to be part of your top four lines on a consistent basis, that's harder, and that becomes, okay, like, is that going to be a priority for you at the deadline, or are you prioritizing a scorer? Because that's probably not going to be the same player.
Yeah, and so my thought to this too is that the Bruins seem to have indicated they're moving away from trying to add a Lucic type player to that fourth line, and that they might be going more with a skill speed fourth line and hoping that Lauko can be the guy that if you need him to fight, then maybe he will, or Frederick. But we talked about this with Boquist. You have a fourth line maybe with Boquist and Heinen on it. It's not a gritty fourth line. That's a roster that has maybe an extra scoring threat back there and some speed.
Well, you know what's interesting too is like the whole Lucic fiasco is from a hockey, well, from a personal standpoint for all involved, certainly disappointing and unacceptable. But again, we're keeping it strictly to hockey on this podcast. Like, from a hockey perspective, like, he was an intriguing signing because he does have that leadership, he does have that experience, and enough pop offensively to be a good fourth liner. And I'm gonna just, it's worth mentioning that Jacob Lauko in 31 games has 3 points, and Oscar Steen in 26 games has 1 point. Lucic had 2 points in 4 games. Like, he's played 4 games and he's still with the same company for those guys. Like, Lucic, what I'm trying to say is, had he been a fixture on this team, through how many games they played? 43. I'm sure he could be probably around 15 to 20 points by now. I'm sure he would have been. And that would probably be good for like maybe 10th or 11th, 12th in team in scoring. So yeah, it's disappointing from a hockey standpoint that it shaped out the way that it did for him in the team. Okay, so any further thoughts on that? No?
Nope.
Okay, so Sam has a question for the great Scott McLaughlin, and she says, Scott, a few weeks ago.
Sam's a she or he. I thought no. Was she? I don't know.
Next email, maybe let us know.
I thought Sam in the past had reached out to us and we surmised that it was, but I don't know, maybe not. Let's just go with Sam. Let's just go with Sam. Okay. Sam says, Scott, a few weeks ago.
Feel free to clarify if you'd like.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Please do, Sam. Scott, a few weeks ago when Patra came back from World Juniors, you mentioned on Twitter that the next decision the Bruins had to make was if they would allow him to hit the 40-game mark, which would count towards a full year of service. Can you please explain further? I'm so confused because I thought once he played 10 games for the Bees that it automatically meant he would be a UFA in 2 years instead of 3. How are the consequences of him playing 10 games versus 40 games different? I'll just stop there for now.
Yeah, so the 10-game mark, what that did is it triggered the first year of his entry-level contract, which is a 3-year contract. So that contract now runs through this season and 2 more. So it expires at the end of the 25-26 season. The 40 games, what that does, as Sam correctly termed it, is it counts towards a year of service when it comes to eventually working his way towards free agency, which would not be in 2 years. So even though his current contract expires in 2 years, there are still multiple years of team control after that through restricted free agency. For a player to be an unrestricted free agent, there's several different ways you can get there, but the most basic, especially for a player like Patra, is 7 years of service or turning 27 years old. So because Patra is currently 19, this counting as his first year of service, which is what happens if he gets to 40 games, means this would now be the first of those 7 years that count towards eventually being an unrestricted free agent, which for him would then kick in at age 26, versus if he stayed under 40 games, the Bruins would basically have an extra year and he wouldn't hit unrestricted free agency until he's 27. Now that I've explained that, let me tell you why I don't even think this matters and why I would not worry about Patra getting to 40 games or the Bruins for some reason trying to avoid it. Because if Matt Patra continues to develop the way that he has and is as good of a player as we all think he is, or think he will be, he is going to be locked up on an extension long before he gets to unrestricted free agency, long before he is 26 years old. So I just wouldn't really worry about that. Like, core players don't get to that deadline. They sign extensions long before then. You see that with Charlie McAvoy, with David Pastrnak, potentially with Jeremy Swayman coming up at some point. You don't run the clock down on core players, which is what I think most of us believe Patra will ultimately be.
All right. Very well said, Scott. Bridgette, anything to add there before we get to part 2 of Sam's question?
No, I think that was kind of a nuts and bolts question there Scott handled.
All right, so I'm going to throw this to you, Bridgette. And actually, this is a good question. I've actually wondered this myself at times. So it's not a dumb question, Sam. It's a great question. So I'm going to change the wording here. Great question, but I'm asking it. There was a game recently where there were like 7 or 8 broken sticks during the game. Can you explain why linesmen, refs don't pick up the broken sticks while play continues? I'm sure there's a rule against it, but isn't it dangerous for the players?
I think I have the closest answer that I can think of, and it's because it's not that there's a rule against it, right? But there's an order of what refs have to look at as important, and that falls well below what they're trying to, what their job is trying to do, which is keep an eye on penalties, offside, icing. This falls below them having to try to keep an eye on everything. And as we talked about when we had a little bit of a ref rant last week, sometimes the game happens really fast, and you have to be able to pay attention to the game as well as somehow pick the stick up at the same time. If you think that you have an opportunity to do that where it doesn't impede your ability to see the play, then you can pick it up. But a lot of times, obviously, that's not the case. So, and if the stick is just down on the ice in the middle of play, you're obviously not weaving in between players to go grab it. So there's a lot of times where it's not really easy or possible. And the priority is just getting the call right and doing the officiating job rather than picking the stick up.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I can't really add anything to that. On the topic of broken sticks, though, and I don't know if Sam was referring specifically to Monday's game or another one, but I found it interesting in Monday's game. Nico Dawes, the Devils goalie, broke his stick, and 2 defensemen had a chance to give him their sticks and didn't. And
I got this. I actually got this.
Stranded without a stick.
This is the new, I think I've mentioned this on a podcast before. This is the new way they want it to be handled. This is the new, like, coaching and, like, decision-making is that you don't give the goaltender a stick unless your goalie specifically is like, yeah, I know I need it. Like, I want my defender. Most goalies would rather have their defender have a stick because they're more likely to be able to block a shot, reach, make a step, like take a puck away and defend in front of the net than the goalie trying to use a stick that's just, it doesn't have a big paddle. Like, you're not getting a goalie stick. You're getting a defender stick that you're not really used to using, and it doesn't actually add that much. So the new thing that people are doing is they would rather have the defender, the regular player, the skater, keep the stick. In this case, I think you're right. In this case, though, it was funny because both defenders then, like, went for a change, like, 10 seconds later, and like play had moved out of the zone, so it wasn't like they were going to go all the way back, but it was just like, peace, Nico, see you, good luck, bud.
All right, Kim emailed us. She said, best guess for all of you, as things stand right now, what players currently on the Bruins roster do you not see being on the team for the 24-25 season through trades, UFA, being kept in the minors, etc.?
Can I start? So there's an obvious spot that I see they're going to lose one. And that's on defense. So this probably will happen in the form of a trade. But if Sweeney decides to keep all his defensemen, wants to keep that depth strong, maybe they won't trade Grzelcyk, but there's a chance. Grzelcyk is it's not a huge contract, but it's one of the bigger contracts in terms of unrestricted free agents that the Bruins have on the books right now. And, a lot of people would argue you don't want to lose him for nothing. So you might want to package him in a deal in case he leaves anyway, like how Clifton left at the end of the season last year. But so there's that temptation to trade him and a 3.6 or $7 million contract. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, at the deadline so that you don't lose him for nothing essentially. But there's also a pro to keeping him, which would be to keep the depth and to keep, him who plays well with McAvoy and you can put him with Carlo, to have that as an option. But either way, when he hits free agency, it's him and Shattenkirk on defense that are unrestricted free agents coming up this season. I feel like one of them is probably gone.
And Derek Forbort.
And Derek Forbort. Yeah. Technically, yeah. It's funny because when I pulled up the list, he doesn't show up there because he's on IR right now. But yes, you're right. One of those three is probably not here come the start of next season.
Yeah. So, yeah, the Bruins have 6 players as of right now hitting unrestricted free agency. Bridgette mentioned the 3 in defense: Grzelcyk, Shattenkirk, Forbort. And then up front, Jake DeBrusk, James Van Riemsdyk, Danton Heinen. Restricted free agents, Jeremy Swayman obviously tops the list, but also Oscar Steen, Jesper Boquist, Parker Wotherspoon, and if you wanted to count Ian Mitchell down in Providence. I actually see the most turnover coming on defense. I could honestly see them letting all 3 of those defensemen walk, Grzelcyk, Shattenkirk, Forbort, and use it as an opportunity with the money to spend to kind of reconfigure what your third pairing looks like. Because I think I understand this ideal player might not exist, but it's almost like they'd like to combine a little bit of all those guys. Grzelcyk, they like his mobility, but obviously he is undersized and we've seen him break down late in seasons and in the playoffs. Forbert, they like his size, penalty killing, but probably wish he had a little more offense in his game. Shattenkirk, I think they like his veteran leadership, and he is playing better now, but we've heard it directly from Jim Montgomery. There's been times where he wasn't playing fast enough. So I could actually see a scenario where they let all of those guys go. You know, if there are players in free agency that they want to target and try to kind of reimagine what their back end looks like. Up front, I could actually see them keeping all of DeBrusk, Van Riemsdyk, Heinen. I think Van Riemsdyk and Heinen could probably come back pretty cheap, 1 or 2 year deal. Van Riemsdyk probably owed a little bit of a raise, over $1 million with the season he's had. I know we have another question for DeBrusk, so I'll save my full thoughts on him for that, but I don't think he's in line for as big of a contract as we might have thought going into this season.
Part 2 of Kim's question is Swayman and Ullmark are obviously great friends, but based on Swayman's comments this week, I think he is done sharing the net and wants to be the main guy. Do you think that will be one of his demands in a new contract? Do you feel at this point that Ullmark knows that if they sign Swayman, that he's gone through a trade in the offseason? So that leads into my answer to the original question. Just for the sake of hot takes, I'll say Ullmark is not on this team in 24-25, not necessarily for the reasons that are outlined in the second part of our question, not because Swayman demands it in a contract, not necessarily. But he does have a modified no trade clause or something like that. Next season, it's a 15-team no trade list that he has. So, you know, that's obviously. So there's 15 teams. So it's just over half the league that he'd be willing to go to. So it would have to be the right situation, and it would be tough to finagle. A lot would have to go right for the Bruins to want to move him successfully if they wanted to. But it's possible. And so for the sake of this question, I could see the Bruins wanting to have that cap space. And yeah, maybe Ullmark's not here next year.
My answer to this question is that first of all, when you talk about it being like a stipulation in his contract when he signs one, I just don't see that being a thing. Like, I don't think he, first of all, has the ability to like do that. I'm sure plenty of goalies in around the league that are veterans have, you know, put that in, but you can't make a team. You can't make a decision for the team on what your backup goalie situation is. Like, that is up to the team to decide how they want to handle that situation. And also with the unique relationship, I don't think he'd be like, I want Ullmark to specifically play fewer games than me, or I want him gone. Because I think they would be pretty devastated if they weren't around each other. So it's, to me, I don't think the contract could or would be like that. And so if Ullmark's not here, it's for different reasons, basically, like Brian said.
Yeah. Swayman has some leverage. He certainly does not have enough leverage to demand that he's, you know, the easy, clear number one starter. Like, to Bridget's point, like, you just can't really write something like that into a contract. Ullmark, whether or not he gets moved, really depends on what Swayman's number comes in at. Because if you get Swayman for something around Ullmark's salary, which is $5 million, or maybe a little more than that, having 10 or 10.5 million tied up in the goaltending position with the cap going up is not actually that crazy. Like, you could probably make that work. If Swayman ends up at 7 million, now you're talking about 12 million, and that gets a little dicier. And now you really have to consider your options and understand that, you know, Ullmark's going into the final year of his contract. So if you are ever going to get anything for him, then it would either have to be an in-season trade this year or an off-season trade this summer. I don't think he's going anywhere this season because they're clearly the biggest strength of the team is goaltending. So I don't think they're trading away from that. I don't know if they feel like Brandon Bussi is 100% ready. Right now, he has had a little bit of a down year in Providence.
And we didn't get to see him at all when he got called up. Swayman played all 5 games so far, and then now he's already back down. So
yeah. So this summer, though, that certainly becomes a conversation, especially if Swayman's number gets pushed, a little higher than maybe the Bruins would be hoping to go.
On this topic, we'll just jump down to Terry on Twitter, who said, should Jim Montgomery go 50-50 with the goalies in the playoffs this time? And part 2, what would be a fair contract for Swayman, term, and AEV?
We're going to have to start going rapid fire answers here because I'm on 23% battery. So let's hit it, guys.
Yeah,
Scott, what's the contract? What should the contract look like?
Bridgette has a remarkable habit of forgetting her charger.
I have left my charger at every rink in the country at this point. It's at Harvard currently. So
if you found a computer charger at a rink somewhere around New England, there's a decent chance it's Bridgette.
Just send it back. Please let us know.
Okay, so I'm on the record as being for a goalie rotation in the playoffs this year. I think the Bruins are also much more open to it. As I've said all along, though, that's if both guys are playing really well down the stretch and you've been rotating goalies down the stretch. If it's a situation where, say, Swayman is outperforming Ullmark and starting 3 out of every 4 games or something, then ride Swayman. Then give him the series. My approach would just be go with whatever is working at the time that the playoffs start.
And we've had this conversation so many, we will again. I mean,
we will again.
Probably like once or twice a month usually. It comes back up for whatever reason. So what about a fair contract for Swayman?
So I was trying to look at some comparables, and it's interesting when you go through goalie salaries. Like there's some true workhorses at the high end that are like 8.5 to like 10.5 million. And then there's almost like a drop where there's like no one between like 6 and 8.5. It's weird. There's like this very top tier, and then there's like no second tier, and then there's a bunch of goalies in like the $5 to $6 million range. And I kind of think that's where Swayman might be because he has not had that number one workhorse load that those goalies up in the 8, 9, 10 million range have had. He has not won a Vezina like some of those guys have. He's not gone on a deep playoff run like some of those goalies have. So I think he's going to be closer to, I'm going to say 6 million maybe is where it ends up for 5 or 6 years. So just to keep it nice and round, I'll say 5 years, $6 million a year, 30 million total.
Real quick. On the goalie platoon thing, if both goalies were playing really well, it's interesting because a lot of people want the Bruins to rotate, and the Bruins would want to rotate. But I bet you if you gave Swayman and Ullmark truth serum, they would not want to rotate. They'd probably both want the net for the playoffs. But anyway, I was laughing a minute ago, not because of you, Scott. I was looking at our mailbag, and Don's Weenie on Twitter, I read his question, and at the very end, he said, "You could just call me Don if you want, LOL." So
not gonna happen. Not gonna happen.
Yeah, it's too great of a Twitter handle.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Get out of here, Don. All right, Don's Weenie. Is the Bruins? I'm just kidding, Don. Is the Bruins penalty differential a concern? 30th overall, way behind any other high-end teams. Yeah, what do you guys think? Is that a concern?
Yes. Absolutely. They've taken way too many penalties this year, and they've talked about it. And, I think earlier in the season, it felt like maybe a little bit of product of like bad luck or bad calls. And I feel like Montgomery even kind of alluded to that a couple of times. Like, well, it just seems like we're not getting as many calls for us as against us. But when it continues now more than halfway through the season, no, it's a you problem. Like, I'm sorry, I would love to feed the Bruins conspiracy theorists out there and tell you the whole league's lined up against you. Guess what? They're not. You're one of the best markets for TV. The NHL loves when the Bruins are good. So it's not a conspiracy.
You and Jack are going to have to fight over this one on level 9 because I think he would make a strong argument against you. He is so convinced of this narrative that they're getting, it's it's because they're Boston that they're getting the penalties.
I mean, the NHL absolutely wants, they want the expansion teams to do well for growing the league, but when it comes down to ratings, there's no argument the NHL wants. If they had it their way, they'd want the original 6 in every single year.
Yeah, Boston Toronto series would have made a lot of money last season.
Yeah, they want a Bruins Rangers conference finals is what they want.
Yes.
Now Don also says maybe the refs hold back come playoff time, so it's not that big of a deal. I mean, I haven't personally. The officiating, the whistles don't go away in the playoffs nowadays like they used to. Maybe in a Game 7 situation they'll put them away, or an overtime situation, but the officiating is pretty tough. Playoffs and regular season. All right, so Matthew says, question for the mailbag: how do you handle DeBrusk in a walk year, and what would be the deadline, not the actual trade deadline, to make a decision on DeBrusk?
I mean, the actual deadline is July 1st when he would hit unrestricted free agency. I don't really think there is one before then. Like, I don't think you have to trade. It's not like if we're not going to re-sign him, we have to trade him before the trade deadline so we get something for him. Like, no, you're trying to win a Stanley Cup. So if it helps you like think about this mentally, consider him a rental. If you think you might lose him in the summer, but I think for the Bruins, like, you can take this pretty much to the wire and see what he's looking for. Like, maybe he is willing to take a little less because he knows he didn't produce this season the way he wanted to. He has said he likes Boston and wants to remain a Bruin, which I know people don't really believe because previously he requested a trade. But if that's true, like, maybe he wants to stay and he just wants to work something out. Or if he wants more than you're comfortable going to, then you can let him test the market and see what happens. Like, it's not the end of the world, but yeah, that'd be my answer. The only real deadline is the actual deadline, which is July 1st.
Yeah, I think maybe she was, or Matt. I'm sorry, Matt was maybe alluding to like getting value while he's still an asset, like trading him this year. But yeah, I mean, objectively, you're right, Scott. But as far as like, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough situation. I don't think they're getting rid of him anyway this year, regardless. So it's kind of, I think it's a moot point.
The only situation I would say where I would be okay with trading him, and we've talked about this, is you're getting a clear upgrade in return. Like, whether it's all in the same trade or two separate ones, you're moving him and his salary out so you can bring in a clear upgrade in your top 6. Like, if that happens, fine, all for it. But otherwise, like, you don't have to trade him just to try to get value.
Right. Okay, final question. Thank you to everybody who's asked so far. Liz says, if Sweeney decides to
Wait. So I want to get to the most important thing that Liz said first, which is that she enjoyed my broadcast yesterday.
Well, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that.
In case my laptop dies first, guys. It says I got 10 minutes left, so like.
Okay. Yes, Bridgette did a phenomenal job with the Beanpot coverage, and will continue to do so.
I most enjoyed your call of BU beating BC in a shootout. Yes. That was my favorite part.
Yeah, I thought that might be your favorite part, and maybe we'll have another one of those in the championship game next Tuesday.
Okay, so I think Liz may have had a type. If Sweeney decides to be a player, I would imagine she says if Sweeney decides to trade a player at the trade deadline. Can you see?
No. I think she just means like be active at the trade deadline.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you. If Sweeney decides to be active at the trade deadline, can you see him dealing any of the rookies, Patra, Lohrei, Beecher, or AHL guys, Merkulov, Lysell, in a package deal to land a big name for the playoffs? I'm sure plenty of teams would jump at the chance. But do you see him gambling away the team's future to do this?
I don't rule anything out, but I certainly don't think he wants to do that. It's also worth noting that the Bruins are right up against the cap, and almost any significant addition is also going to have to involve money going out. And those are all small salaries. So you're talking about someone else on the active roster probably has to go out as well. Just to quickly touch on second part of her question, any chance Sweeney leaves the roster as is to see what he has and then decide over the summer? Here's what I think is going to happen at the deadline. I think it's going to be a relatively smaller deal. I don't think there's going to be a huge impact trade because of their cap situation and just because of the tough spot that they're in. But I do think they'll try to do something because you have a team that's in first place right now, and you want to at least show the guys in that room that we're doing something. We believe in you, and we are adding. Bridgette, give us your final thoughts with your 6% left.
Yeah, I'm getting kicked here. I'm sorry, I wasn't even paying attention because I was trying to make sure my laptop didn't die. This is my final thoughts are I probably shouldn't leave my laptop charger at rinks anymore. I need Ange to tell me, Bridgette, do you have your laptop charger?
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Hopefully there's a Best Buy near you.
I ordered something on Amazon.
Did you?
Today. Yeah.
I think the last part was asking about Patra, Carlo, and Forbert's injury timelines.
We got 4%, bro. Come on.
You guys, well, hey, look, we can't. That's not our fault. You should don't forget your charger.
I can leave, Ben. I can leave.
I think you guys answered that though off the top. So I think we're good. All right. Now she's down to 3%, and we're gonna drag this out till she's 1%, and then she's gone.
Bye, Bridgette.
Scott, I hope you can save this recording.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
All right. Well, on behalf of Bridgette, myself, and Scott.
Yeah. If you guys are actually listening to this episode, then we figured it out. So.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon.